Hello, this is Mary from the Kitchen Table Radio. For their lonely, 74-year-old mother, Grace, the children found a perfect solution. A 5-star retirement community where she would be safe and happy. But that dream soon became a nightmare. The promised care turned into neglect, and her new home felt more like a prison. The ultimate betrayal was when they forbade her from attending her own granddaughter's birthday. That's when her heartbreak ignited into a burning rage. How did she expose their hypocrisy and fight back? To see her satisfying revenge, like and subscribe, and stay tuned until the very end. My name is Grace, and for 74 years, I believed that the heart of a family was built on devotion. Today is my 74th birthday. This morning, I sat before the vanity mirror, the one my husband Arthur bought for our 25th anniversary, and a long, shuddering sigh escaped my lips. The face staring back at me was a stranger I knew intimately, its web of wrinkles a map of a life I could scarcely believe was my own. Each line around my eyes was a memory of laughter, each crease by my mouth a testament to worry. My hair, once the color of dark honey, was now a crown of snow white, a final surrender to time's relentless march. It wasn't sadness that made my eyes misty, but a profound, aching sense of distance. Distance from the young woman in the wedding photo on my nightstand, her eyes bright with a future she couldn't yet see. I rose and walked through the quiet house, my hand trailing along the familiar floral wallpaper. Every object held a ghost. Arthur's worn leather armchair still held the faint scent of his pipe tobacco and the shape of his body. The height chart penciled on the kitchen doorframe, marking Michael and Sarah's growth spurts, was a monument to a time of joyful chaos. When they were young, life with Arthur wasn't measured in wealth, but in hope and exhaustion. He worked long hours at the factory, his hands calloused but always gentle with me, while I juggled part-time jobs and the endless beautiful work of motherhood. Those years were a blur of packed lunches, frantic searches for lost soccer cleats, and whispered bedtime stories. They were hard, yes, but they were the happiest years of my life, stitched together with laughter and unconditional love. When life's storms brewed, Arthur's hand was always there for mine to hold, a steady anchor in any sea.
"We're a team, Gracie,"
he'd say, his voice a low rumble. And we were. Time, as it always does, stole those years away. Michael became a successful businessman, always sharp in a suit, his calendar a fortress of meetings. Sarah became a wonderful, patient teacher, with a gift for helping children see the magic in the world. Then came the grandchildren, Liam and Sophie, whose laughter was a fountain of youth that briefly chased away the encroaching silence. But life is never that simple. 2 years ago, Arthur passed away from a sudden heart attack. He was there one morning, complaining good-naturedly about the squirrels at the bird feeder, and gone by the afternoon. The silence he left behind wasn't just an absence of sound, it was a physical presence, a heavy blanket that smothered the house. My children, caught in the swift currents of their own busy lives, tried their best at first, but their visits grew shorter, their calls more rushed.
"Hi Mom, can I call you back? I'm just heading into a meeting."
Grace, it's so good to hear your voice. Things are just so hectic with the kids' school fundraiser right now.
I always said I understood. But as the months turned into a year, then 2, the loneliness grew from a quiet ache into a vast, silent ocean. And so, I found myself on my 74th birthday, with no one to share a slice of cake with. As I sat staring out the window, the doorbell rang, its chime so loud in the stillness it made me jump. My heart fluttered with a nervous, foolish hope. It was Michael.
"Happy birthday, Mom. I've come with a proposal. Something I think you'll really like."
He held a glossy, tri-fold brochure in his hand, its cover showing smiling, silver-haired seniors playing tennis. The proposal was for me to move into a luxury retirement community called
The Willows at Meadow Creek. As he spoke, a cold knot formed in my stomach. The words hung in the air, feeling like a judgment. Are they trying to get rid of me? Am I a burden? Mom, this place is incredible. It's not like those old nursing homes.
He rushed on, sensing my silence. He unfolded the brochure on the coffee table.
Look, it has the best facilities, a heated indoor pool, a gym with personal trainers, all sorts of classes. Art, music, even French. You'll be able to socialize with people your own age, make new friends.
I have friends, I said quietly, though I knew I hadn't seen most of them in months.
I know, Mom, but here you'd be surrounded by people. You wouldn't be so alone.
His words, meant to be kind, felt like a small, sharp knife. He saw my loneliness, and instead of filling it himself, he wanted to outsource it. Listening to him, my heart was a tangle of emotions. I felt a sting of resentment, but also a flicker of shameful curiosity at the pictures of the bright, hotel-like rooms and lush gardens. If I go there, how often will you all be able to visit? I asked, my voice barely a whisper.
Of course, we'll visit all the time, Mom. All the time.
He repeated, a little too quickly.
This is about your safety and happiness. We want to make sure you're healthy and safe, and never lonely. That's what this is all about.
Leaving this home, a house built not just of wood and nails but of shared dreams and 50 years of love, felt like a betrayal to Arthur's memory. It felt like giving up. I don't know, Michael. This is my home.
Mom, why don't we just go take a look? No commitments, just a tour. See it for yourself. What's the harm in looking?
I finally nodded, feeling more like I was surrendering than agreeing. The next day, he drove me to the Willows. As we pulled through the ornate iron gates, it was, admittedly, breathtaking. It looked more like a five-star resort, with a grand, hotel-like exterior and perfectly manicured gardens. A staff member with a brilliant, practiced smile greeted us in the marble lobby, where a small fountain gurgled peacefully.
Welcome to the Willows. We're so glad you're here. Please, take your time and look around.
As we toured the interior, my resolve began to waver. The private suites were spacious and bright. We saw a state-of-the-art fitness center where seniors in matching tracksuits were on treadmills, a hushed library with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and leather armchairs, and a charming bistro. In the art studio, an instructor was patiently guiding a resident's hand on a canvas.
You see, Mrs. Gable, if you just blend the blue a little more here, perfect.
The resident, Mrs. Gable, beamed with pride. For the first time in a long while, a small spark of excitement ignited within me. I used to love painting.
Look at this, Mom. They have yoga, painting classes, music lessons, even a book club.
He said, pointing to the glossy activities schedule. Michael, a place this nice must be incredibly expensive.
Don't you worry about that, Mom. Dad's life insurance and our contributions will cover it. We want this for you. Your happiness is what's most important.
My defenses were crumbling, but one deep, cold fear remained. What if I'm even lonelier in a crowd? Just then, a woman with a warm, friendly face and sparkling eyes passed by. She smiled.
You must be new here. My name is Eleanor. I moved in 2 months ago. I was worried at first, too, thought I'd just stay in my room knitting. But I absolutely love it now. The people are wonderful. I've made so many friends, and every day is an adventure. We have a surprisingly competitive bingo night on Thursdays.
Listening to her genuine enthusiasm, a weight seemed to lift. Her cheerfulness was infectious. Could I be like her? Could I find joy here? In the end, I made the decision. It was a leap into the unknown, but it was also a chance for a new beginning. Moving day was a blur. My children and grandchildren came, filling the house with their voices one last time. As they carried boxes, I took a final walk through the empty rooms, my hand brushing against the walls. Here was the spot where Sarah took her first steps. There was the window where Arthur and I would watch thunderstorms roll in. Each memory was a small, sharp pain.
Don't worry, Mom. We'll be here all the time. Every weekend.
We'll come visit a lot, Grandma. And we'll swim in the pool. The kids shouted, as I unpacked in my new suite, my books, my photographs, my favorite armchair which now looked small and out of place. It finally sank in. This was my new life. The view from my window was of a perfectly landscaped courtyard, beautiful but sterile, so different from the familiar, wild old oak tree in my backyard. That night, lying in a new bed and staring at an unfamiliar ceiling, the promises of my children echoed in my ears. With a heart full of both terror and a fragile spark of hope, I spent my first night at the Willows. My new life at the Willows began like a dream unfolding in soft focus. The first few months were a whirlwind of pleasant introductions and new experiences. For the first time since Arthur passed, the crushing weight of loneliness began to lift. I fell into a comfortable routine that felt both liberating and structured. Mornings often started with a gentle yoga class in a sunlit studio, my old, stiff joints slowly remembering what it felt like to move with a quiet grace. I even picked up a paintbrush again, something I hadn't done in 30 years. The art instructor, a kind woman named Maria, praised my work, making me blush like a schoolgirl.
You have a real gift, Grace. A natural eye for color. Don't ever let it go dormant again.
My friendship with Eleanor blossomed. We were two peas in a pod, finding humor in the same silly things and sharing a deep, unspoken understanding that came from having lived long lives. We'd save seats for each other in the grand dining hall, take long, meandering walks around the prize-winning rose gardens after dinner, and share stories from our pasts, weaving the threads of our lives together. I would call my children, Michael and Sarah, my voice genuinely bright for the first time in years. It's wonderful. I'm taking a painting class, and I've made a lovely friend named Eleanor. We get into all sorts of trouble.
That's so great to hear, Mom. We're so happy for you.
He'd say, and I could practically hear the relief in his voice, the sound of a burden being lifted. The first sign that something was amiss was subtle, easy to dismiss. It started in the dining hall. The beautifully crafted menus that had initially impressed us, with dishes like grilled salmon with asparagus and lemon herb roasted chicken, were gradually replaced by blander, more generic fare. The chicken became dry and stringy, the vegetables were often boiled to a sad, gray mush, and the
chef's special became a recurring, unidentifiable casserole. Is it just me, or has the food taken a nosedive?
Eleanor whispered to me over a plate of lumpy mashed potatoes one evening. I was thinking the same thing. I admitted. Maybe the head chef is on vacation. But the chef never seemed to return. Then, other small things started to fray at the edges of our perfect new lives. The weekly housekeeping became less thorough. A thin film of dust would linger on the bookshelves and windowsills. The vibrant bouquets of fresh flowers in the lobby, once replaced every other day, were now left until their petals browned at the edges. The staff, once so warm and attentive, began to seem stretched thin, their smiles no longer reaching their eyes. A simple request could be met with a sigh and a long delay. "Excuse me, the light bulb in my reading lamp has burned out," I mentioned to a young aide at the front desk one afternoon.
"I'll put in a maintenance request for you, Ms. Grace,"
he said without looking up from his computer. 3 days later, I was still reading in the dim light of a single lamp. These were small annoyances, the kinds of things you tell yourself not to complain about. But they began to accumulate, like stones in a pocket, weighing us down. The deeper chill, however, came not from the staff, but from the growing silence from my own family. Michael's promise of visiting
all the time had quickly dwindled. What started as weekly visits became bi-weekly, then faded into a single, rushed visit a month. Their excuses were always plausible. The kids had a soccer tournament. A big project was due at work. Someone had a cold. I tried to be understanding. I truly did. But each cancellation was a small heartbreak. One Saturday, I waited all day for a planned family visit. I had dressed in my favorite blue cardigan and even put on a little lipstick, something I rarely did. I sat by my window, my heart leaping at the sound of every car that pulled into the driveway. Around 3 p.m., my phone rang. "Mom, I am so sorry."
His voice was strained.
"Sophie woke up with a fever this morning. We just can't make it. We don't want to bring any germs in there."
Oh, of course," I said, my own voice sounding hollow and distant to my ears. "Is she all right? Give her my love."
"She'll be fine. Just a bug. We'll reschedule for next week, I promise."
But he didn't reschedule. The following day, scrolling through my phone, I saw a picture his wife had posted online. It was a bright, sunny photo of the whole family, including a perfectly healthy-looking Sophie, smiling gleefully on a Ferris wheel at a local street fair. The date stamp was from the previous day. The ache in my chest was sharp and sudden, a physical pain of being forgotten, of being so easily lied to. I was out of sight, and therefore, truly out of mind. The true turning point, the moment when our collective unease curdled into real fear, happened on a Tuesday night. I was in the library when we heard a sickening crash from the hallway, followed by a weak cry for help. A group of us rushed out to find Mr. Henderson, a quiet man who always sat by the window, collapsed on the floor. His face was a ghastly shade of pale, and his hand was clutching his chest.
"Get help. Call the nurse."
Eleanor shouted, her voice shaking. One resident fumbled to push the red emergency call button on the wall. A piercing alarm began to sound and a red light flashed, but no one came. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Mr. Henderson's breathing grew shallow and ragged. The atmosphere in the hallway turned from frantic to terrified.
"Where is everybody? They promised 24-hour medical support."
A man cried out, his voice cracking with panic. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, 12 minutes, by the clock on the wall, a single, flustered-looking aide came jogging down the hall, not even a nurse. An ambulance was called, and Mr. Henderson was eventually taken to the hospital. We later learned he'd had a stroke. He survived, but the incident sent a shockwave of raw fear through the Willows. This wasn't about bland food or dusty shelves anymore. This was about our safety. Our lives. That night, Eleanor and I sat in my room, the television off, the silence heavy between us.
"They lied to us, Grace,"
she said, her voice trembling with a quiet, cold rage.
"That response time, it was unforgivable. What if that had been you? Or me?"
"I know," I whispered, hugging my arms around myself as if to hold my own body together. "I keep thinking about Michael's promises. We want to make sure you're safe," he said. The irony was so bitter it felt like poison. My children had put me here to ensure my safety, paying a small fortune for a promise that was proving to be a dangerous illusion. The beautiful facade of the Willows was cracking, and for the first time, I could see the cold, ugly truth of neglect underneath. The initial excitement I had felt upon arriving had completely vanished, replaced by a growing sense of betrayal and a chilling, familiar loneliness. I had traded one prison of memories for another, only this one had gilded bars and a much, much higher price. The incident with Mr. Henderson shattered the fragile peace at the Willows, and in its place, a thick fog of fear and resentment settled over the community. It was a poison that seeped into everything. You could see it in the way people now eyed each other in the hallways, their friendly greetings replaced by wary nods. You could feel it in the dining hall, where conversations became hushed and tense, laced with anxious whispers about response times and liability. The management's response was a single notice posted in the lobby, a masterpiece of corporate doublespeak about
reviewing our emergency protocols, and our continued commitment to resident safety. It felt less like an apology and more like a carefully crafted legal shield, a profound insult to our very real terror. This shared fear, instead of uniting us in a common cause, began to turn us against each other. The pressure needed a release, and it found one in the pettiest of places. I saw it firsthand in the fitness center a few days later. Eleanor and I were on the stationary bikes, pedaling at a gentle pace suited for 70-year-old knees. A man who had been waiting impatiently behind us, Mr. Gable, a gruff former executive who still wore his crisp polo shirts like a suit of armor, finally strode over, his face a mask of irritation. "Are you two planning on setting up camp here? Some of us would like to get a real workout in before lunch."
I was taken aback by his overt hostility. Before, he would have at least offered a grumpy hello. "We'll be done shortly, Henry. There's no need to be rude."
"Rude?"
he scoffed, his face reddening.
"What's rude is paying a fortune for a state-of-the-art gym and having to wait in line behind people who are moving in slow motion. This isn't a social club."
Eleanor, who rarely lost her temper, stopped pedaling and turned to him, her eyes flashing.
"We have just as much right to be here as you do. Your monthly fee isn't any higher than ours."
"At least I'm using the equipment for its intended purpose, not as a place to have a chat."
The argument escalated, drawing the attention of others. A staff member, a young man named Kevin, eventually intervened, but his tone was weary and dismissive. All right, let's all just calm down. Please, share the equipment." He offered no real solution, just a plea for quiet, and the sense of community we had once cherished curdled further into suspicion and resentment. I retreated more and more to the solitude of my room. The Willows was no longer a sanctuary. It was a gilded cage filled with anxious, unhappy people rattling their bars. It was in this tense atmosphere that the week of my granddaughter Sophie's 7th birthday arrived. For weeks, it was the one bright spot on my horizon. I had been working on her gift in the art studio, a small, wooden jewelry box. I spent every afternoon carefully painting tiny bluebirds and pale pink roses on the lid. Inside, I placed a delicate silver locket, the same one my own mother had given me. I remembered her placing it in my hand, her fingers warm over mine.
"To keep your loved ones close to your heart,"
she had whispered. This gift was more than a gift, it was a legacy.
"Oh, Sophie's going to treasure this, Grace. It's just beautiful,"
Eleanor said when I showed it to her, her eyes soft with understanding. The day before the party, I called Sarah, my heart filled with an excitement I hadn't felt in years. "Sarah, darling, what time should I be ready for the party tomorrow?" There was a brief, telling pause.
"Oh, Mom, I thought Michael told you. The party is at our house, but it doesn't start until 6.
"Wonderful, I'll be ready."
"Well, Mom, the thing is, can you get here? I mean, with the rules at the Willows, they're so strict about evenings."
Her voice trailed off uncertainly. A cold dread washed over me. I went to the front desk, my precious, tissue-wrapped gift clutched in my hands. The stern-faced administrator was on duty, her nameplate reading, Ms. Davis's. "Excuse me, I need to arrange for a car service for tomorrow evening. It's a very special occasion, my granddaughter's birthday party." Ms. Davis glanced up, her eyes like chips of ice.
"I'm sorry, but evening outings for social events are not permitted. It's against our policy for safety and liability reasons, as outlined in Section 4B of your residency agreement."
"Policy?" I stammered, the bureaucratic jargon feeling like a wall. "But, it's her 7th birthday. I have to be there. I'm her grandmother.
You can celebrate with her when she visits you here.
She said flatly.
We can arrange for a cake in one of the private dining rooms if you like. There would be a nominal fee.
That's not the same. I cried, my composure cracking. This isn't a prison. I am a grown woman. How is celebrating with my family a safety issue?
These are the rules you agreed to, Ms. Grace.
She said, her voice unchanging, utterly devoid of empathy.
They are for your own safety.
The words hit me like a physical blow. My own safety. The same excuse that failed Mr. Henderson. Defeated, I stumbled back to my room and called Sarah, the tears now streaming down my cheeks. I can't come. I sobbed into the phone. They won't let me leave. The policy? The silence on the other end was heavy, filled with Sarah's helpless guilt and my own bottomless heartbreak.
Oh, Mom, I'm so sorry. I didn't think, I just assumed.
Her voice was small. I hung up the phone and fell onto my bed, clutching the little jewelry box so tightly my knuckles ached. And I wept. I wept for Sophie and her missed birthday. I wept for the woman I used to be, a matriarch who hosted parties and whose presence was essential. Now, I was a resident whose presence was subject to a policy. I was no longer a person, I was a liability. A soft knock came at the door.
Grace, it's me. Can I come in?
She found me there, my face buried in a pillow. She sat on the edge of the bed and placed a warm, steady hand on my back. When my sobs finally subsided, she spoke, and her voice was no longer just gentle. It was fierce.
This is not how your story ends, Grace.
What choice do I have? I whispered. I'm trapped. My own children put me here to be safe, and now I'm a prisoner.
Then we leave.
She said simply. I lifted my head, my eyes swollen. Leave? And go where? How? They have contracts, our money.
Forget the money.
She said, her eyes boring into mine.
My husband worked for 40 years at a steel mill so I could be secure. He didn't work so I could ask for permission to see my own family. We are not inventory to be managed, Grace. We are women who have raised families, survived hardships, and loved and lost. We are still alive. Our lives are not over just because we are old. We are the main characters of our own stories, and it is long past time we started acting like it.
Her words struck a chord deep inside me, awakening a part of myself I thought had died with Arthur. The stubborn, resilient woman who had fought for her children and her home. The fear was still there, a cold knot in my stomach, but now, a new feeling was taking root beside it. A hot, powerful surge of anger. A righteous, cleansing anger. You're right. I said, my voice hoarse but steady. I sat up, wiping my eyes with the back of my hand, my spine straightening. You are absolutely right. This is not how my story ends. We're getting out of here. Eleanor gripped my hand, her fingers surprisingly strong. In that moment, we weren't two frail old women. We were partners in a rebellion. The tears were gone, replaced by a steely resolve. But we won't just sneak away. I added, a plan already beginning to spark in the ashes of my despair, my mind suddenly clear and sharp. They owe us. For every lie, for every moment of fear. And we are going to make them pay. That night, sleep was a stranger. The righteous anger that had flared up in me burned alongside a cold flame of fear. Every creak of the building, every distant cough from another room, sounded like a threat. But for the first time in 2 years, I did not feel entirely alone in the darkness. Eleanor was in the room next door, and we were bound by a new and terrifying purpose. We met in my room at the first hint of dawn, the door clicking softly shut behind her. The early light was still a pale, watery gray, but our minds were sharp. We were two generals plotting a campaign over cups of lukewarm coffee, which tasted like conspiracy and hope. If we're going to do this, we need to be smart about it. I said, my voice low and determined. I had found a simple spiral notebook and a pen. They looked ordinary, but to me, they felt like weapons.
We can't just storm in there yelling. That's what they expect from two hysterical old women. We need leverage. Cold, hard, undeniable proof. But what if they find out what we're doing?
Eleanor whispered, her practical nature surfacing as she nervously pleated the fabric of her robe. They could make things very unpleasant for us, Grace. I heard what happened to Mrs. Gable when she complained about the laundry room. They started losing her mail for weeks. They are already making things unpleasant. I countered, my voice harder than I intended.
They are isolating us, neglecting us, and waiting for us to fade away quietly. The worst they can do is kick us out, and that's already our goal. The only way this works is if we are meticulous. Every detail matters. We become invisible. We watch, we listen, and we write everything down. All right then,
she said, taking a deep breath and letting it out slowly. A determined glint appeared in her eye. Meticulous it is. I opened the notebook to a fresh page. At the top, in my neatest cursive, I wrote, The Willows, a ledger of lies. We document everything, I said. Proof that this place is not what they sold our children. Broken promises, negligence, every single instance of disrespect. Everything. Our mission began that very evening in the dining hall. The chef's special was a pale, watery stew with a few lonely-looking chunks of mystery meat floating alongside mushy carrots. I saw the familiar looks of resignation on the faces around us. But tonight, I felt no resignation. I felt a cold fury. Back in the safety of my room, I made our first official entry. October 5th, 6 p.m. dinner. Beef stew. Meat was tough and unidentifiable. Vegetables boiled beyond recognition. Several residents, including Mr. Gable in room 301, pushed their bowls away after one bite. Eleanor added her own note. Salt content excessively high, not suitable for residents with hypertension. We were no longer just complaining. We were building a case, brick by painstaking brick. Our quiet rebellion continued. The smartphone became our most valuable tool. The camera felt foreign and clumsy in my hands, which trembled slightly as I walked through the lobby, feigning a call to my daughter. The grand floral arrangement at the center was the same one from last week, now visibly wilting, a few brown petals littering the polished floor. I angled the phone down, my heart thumping. I managed to take a quick, slightly blurry photo. It wasn't perfect, but it was proof. A few days later, we documented a more serious failure. Eleanor sat in the library while I went to the front desk. Excuse me, I said to the aide.
I seem to be out of blankets in my suite, and the heating feels a bit low tonight. I'll see if I can find one for you when I have a moment, Ms. Grace.
He said, not looking up. I returned to my room. Eleanor started the timer on her watch. 47 minutes later, a thin, worn blanket was delivered without a word. We logged it. We knew our own testimony wasn't enough. We needed a chorus of voices. That evening, we cautiously approached Arthur Miller, a gentle man whose heater had been broken for nearly a month. We found him in the library, the coldest room in the building, huddled under a thin blanket, his breath misting slightly in the air. Arthur, I began softly, sitting beside him.
Eleanor and I are collecting information. We have a logbook. We have photographs. We are building a case about the gap between what we were promised and what we are receiving. His eyes, watery and fearful, darted around the room. Oh, I don't know, Grace.
He stammered.
I don't want to make trouble. What if they retaliate? Retaliate how, Arthur?
She asked gently.
By making your room colder? By ignoring you more than they already do? They could restrict my phone calls. Or move me to a different room, one without a good view.
He whispered, listing the small dignities that were his last possessions. I reached out and placed my hand on his arm. His skin felt like cold paper. Arthur, when my husband was alive, he always told me that the only thing worse than a bully is the silence that allows them to thrive. I have been silent for 2 years, and I have never felt more invisible. They left you in the cold, Arthur. Just like they barred the door on me when I wanted to see my own granddaughter on her birthday. It's not just about a broken heater. It's about them trying to make us believe we no longer matter. They are counting on us being too scared and too tired to speak up. But if one person speaks, they are a complainer. If a dozen of us speak, with proof, we are a force they cannot ignore. He looked at our determined faces, then down at his own trembling hands. A long minute passed. He finally looked up, and I saw a flicker of something new in his eyes, something other than fear.
My daughter sent me a warm electric blanket last week. They told me it was against the rules. An unauthorized appliance. They confiscated it.
He said, his voice filled with a newfound indignation.
They said it was a fire hazard, but the lamp next to my bed has a frayed cord, and I've reported that 3 times. I have the receipts for the blanket. Would that help you? Yes, Arthur.
I said, my voice thick with emotion.
That would help us very much. That small victory was like a dam breaking. Wordlessly, Arthur Miller had become our first recruit. Inspired by his quiet courage, a few others followed. A woman whose late medication delivery caused her to miss a rare video call with her son overseas. A man whose wheelchair had a squeaky wheel that was never fixed, announcing his every lonely passage down the halls. Many were still too afraid, but a handful, a brave and desperate handful, agreed to write down their stories. After a week of tireless, secret work, we had assembled our case. It was a thick manila folder, filled with our logbook, its pages crammed with dates, times, and detailed descriptions of neglect. Tucked inside were the dozen dated photographs, blurry but damning. And behind them, the most powerful evidence of all, 12 signed, handwritten statements from our fellow residents, each telling a story of a promise broken. It was a weapon forged in disappointment and sealed with courage. We sat in my room, the folder on the table between us. It felt heavy, not just with paper, but with the weight of our collective pain and hope. It's time,
Eleanor said, her voice steady now. It's time. I agreed, my heart pounding with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. We walked to the administration office side by side, our steps slow but unwavering down the long corridor. The marble floors that once seemed so grand now felt cold and hostile. We didn't knock. I took a deep breath, my hand closing around the polished brass handle. I pushed the door open. The manager, Mr. Davies, was on the phone, laughing loudly at some private joke. He looked up, his smile vanishing into a mask of annoyance at the interruption, ready to dismiss us. He had no idea that we were not there to complain. We were there to win. The door to Mr. Davies' office swung inward, revealing a scene of corporate comfort that stood in stark contrast to the cold anxiety in the rest of the building. The carpet was thick, the mahogany desk was polished to a mirror shine, and the air smelled of expensive leather and faint, cloying air freshener. Mr. Davies was leaning back in his high-backed chair, laughing loudly into his telephone, one hand gesturing expansively. He glanced up as we entered, his smile faltering for a second before morphing into a mask of polite annoyance at the interruption. He held up a single, manicured finger, silently commanding us to wait. We did. We stood side by side, 2 silent, unmoving figures in the center of his plush carpet, the heavy folder held firmly in my hands. The weight did not unnerve us. It settled us, hardening our resolve with every tick of the ornate clock on his wall. Finally, he ended his call with a booming laugh and a promise of
drinks at the club. He placed the receiver down and swiveled his chair to face us, his professional smile clicking into place. It was a smile that didn't reach his eyes, which scanned us with a look of weary impatience. Ladies, wonderful to see you. To what do I owe the pleasure? I was just about to head into a conference call, so if we could be brief.
His tone was syrupy, the kind one uses on a small child or a slightly senile aunt. He clearly expected a complaint about a leaky faucet or the quality of the bingo cards. I took a half step forward, my grip tightening on the manila folder. My voice, when I spoke, was clearer and steadier than I had heard it in years. There was no tremble, no hint of tears. There was only the cold, hard weight of purpose. We are not here for pleasantries, Mr. Davies.
We are here to inform you that we are terminating our residency contracts, effective immediately. He blinked. For a moment, his professional mask slipped, revealing a flicker of genuine surprise, which was quickly replaced by condescending amusement. He chuckled, a short, sharp sound that grated on my nerves. Terminate your contracts? I'm afraid it's not quite that simple, ladies.
He steepled his fingers, leaning forward as if explaining a complex concept.
As I'm sure you'll recall from the documents you signed, your agreements have a standard 1-year commitment. Terminating early comes with a rather significant financial penalty. We can't just have residents leaving on a whim, now can we? This is not a whim.
Eleanor's voice was like ice, cutting through his patronizing tone. We are aware of what we signed. We also signed on the basis of a series of explicit promises your company made regarding a premium quality of care, nutrition, and, most importantly, safety. Promises you have systematically and dangerously failed to keep. Mr. Davies let out another condescending chuckle, though this one sounded a bit strained. He leaned back in his chair, trying to regain control of the room. Ladies, I can assure you, the Willows maintains the very highest standards of. Please, don't. I interrupted, my voice quiet but firm, stopping his corporate platitude mid-sentence. With a slow, deliberate movement, I placed the thick manila folder on the polished surface of his desk. It landed with a soft, definitive thud that seemed to echo in the silent room. We've heard the marketing slogans. We are here to discuss the reality. Perhaps you'd like to see it for yourself. He stared at the folder for a moment, then opened it with a flick of his wrist, a dismissive smirk still playing on his lips. I watched his face as he saw the first page, the title I had written in my neatest cursive. The Willows. A Ledger of Lies. His smirk faltered. He flipped the page and saw the neatly organized, dated entries. Let's start with the basics, I said, pointing to a page in the notebook.
On October 5th, the chef's special was a beef stew so unpalatable that at least 5 residents on our floor returned their bowls untouched. On October 7th, the lobby flowers, which your brochure promises are fresh daily, were 7 days old. We have a photograph. On October 9th, a call for assistance from a resident with a spilled water hazard in room 214 took 12 minutes to be answered. We have the exact times logged. I let him absorb that, then continued, my voice even. Let's talk about maintenance. Your contract promises a safe and fully functional living environment. Yet Mr. Arthur Miller in room 112 has had a non-functional heater since September 14th, despite 3 separate maintenance requests. It is now October the 10th. We have copies of his requests. Mr. Davies' face was beginning to lose its color. He shuffled through the pages, his eyes widening as he saw the dated photographs, the clinical descriptions of neglect. Eleanor leaned forward, her voice picking up where mine left off. Now, let's discuss safety, Mr. Davies. The issue of paramount importance, according to your own mission statement.
Her tone was chillingly calm. On the evening of September 30th, Mr. Henderson of room 312 suffered a stroke in the 3rd-floor hallway. The emergency call button was activated at 8:42 p.m. The first staff member, an aide and not a registered nurse, arrived on the scene at 8:54 p.m. A 12-minute response time for a medical emergency. An emergency which, I might add, took place less than 100 feet from the nurse's station, which we have photographically documented was empty at the time. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle in the room. His breathing was shallow now. And finally, I said, my voice softening slightly, though it only made the words more devastating.
Let's talk about the promise of a fulfilling, dignified life. On October 3rd, my granddaughter Sophie turned 7 years old. I was forbidden from attending her birthday party due to policy. I was told it was for my own safety. Can you please explain, Mr. Davies, how seeing my family constitutes a safety risk? Or does the contract I signed also strip me of my role as a grandmother? I flipped to the back of the folder, to the stack of handwritten pages. This is not just our story. Here is a signed statement from Mrs. Chen, whose medication has been delivered late 6 times in the past month. And here is one from Mr. Washington, who is still waiting for a grab bar to be installed in his shower, 2 months after he requested it. There are 12 statements in total, from residents who are tired of being ignored. The silence in the room was thick and suffocating. Mr. Davies stared at the handwritten statements, his knuckles white as he gripped the edge of his mahogany desk. The smug, condescending manager was gone, replaced by a cornered man whose expensive suit suddenly seemed too big for him. He opened his mouth, then closed it, looking for an escape route where there was none. This is all a gross exaggeration.
He finally stammered, shuffling the papers as if the answer lay somewhere within them.
A series of unfortunate, isolated incidents. Perhaps your memories are not what they once were. It's quite common for, do not.
Eleanor's voice was dangerously quiet, but it cut him off more effectively than a shout.
Do not dare to patronize us or question our faculties. We are not confused. We are witnesses. And this folder is our testimony. He visibly flinched. He abandoned that line of attack and tried another, falling back on the familiar language of corporate apology. Look, clearly there have been some operational challenges. Staffing shortages, supply chain disruptions. These are issues affecting the entire industry.
We are not paying to hear about the challenges of your industry, Mr. Davies. I said, my patience finally exhausted. We paid for a promise. A promise of safety, dignity, and care that you have fundamentally broken. Your operational challenges are not our concern. The consequences of them, however, are. And now, you will deal with the consequences. He stared at me, his eyes wide with a dawning panic. He saw that we were not there to negotiate for better food or a more attentive staff. We were past that, we were there to leave. So, here are your options. It's very simple. I continued, leaning forward slightly. Option 1. You terminate our contracts and the contracts of the 12 other residents named in this file who wish to leave, effective immediately and without penalty. You will refund our security deposits in full, by the end of this week. We leave quietly, and this folder and all its contents are yours to shred. It becomes an internal matter. I paused, letting the weight of my words sink in. He was about to protest, to talk again about the contract, but I held up a hand and continued. Option 2.
I take the copy of this folder that my son is holding for me. He's a businessman with some very influential friends. And we walk out of this office and straight to the city's biggest news station. They are always looking for a good story, especially one with photographic evidence about the systemic neglect and exploitation of senior citizens at Meadow Creek's most expensive and prestigious retirement community. I imagine a headline like that would have far greater financial penalties for your company than a few refunded deposits. The choice is entirely yours. The threat hung in the air, potent and undeniable. He stared at the folder on his desk as if it were a venomous snake. I could see the frantic calculations behind his eyes. The cost of the refunds versus the catastrophic cost of a public scandal. The fight was over. He slumped in his expensive leather chair, the picture of utter defeat, all the air seeming to leave his body at once. There will be no need for that.
He mumbled, his voice barely a whisper. He couldn't meet our eyes, instead staring at the glossy surface of his desk. I will process the paperwork. Victory was a strange, quiet feeling. There was no grand explosion, only the defeated sigh of a man in an expensive suit. We didn't gloat, we simply stood up, our movements slow but unwavering. You will draw up the termination agreements today, Mr. Davies. I stated, not as a question, but as a final term of surrender.
For myself, for Mrs. Miller, and for the 11 other residents who provided testimony. There will be no penalties, and our deposits will be refunded by certified check within 5 business days. We will return this afternoon to sign them. He simply nodded, his eyes still fixed on his desk. He looked smaller, diminished. I pushed the manila folder an inch further towards the center of his desk, leaving it there as a monument to his defeat. Then, Eleanor and I turned and walked out of the office, closing the door softly behind us. The long corridor, which had felt so hostile on our way in, now felt like a path to freedom. The marble floors no longer seemed cold, but cool and solid beneath our feet. As we stepped out into the main lobby, a small group of residents who had been waiting anxiously, including Arthur Miller, looked up at us. They didn't need to ask. They saw it on our faces. Arthur Miller took a hesitant step forward. "Did you?"
he began, his voice trembling with hope. Eleanor reached out and put a hand on his arm. She simply smiled and nodded.
We did it, Arthur. We're getting out.
A wave of quiet, profound emotion washed over the small group. There was no cheering, only the soft sound of relieved sighs and a few shed tears. Arthur Miller gripped my hand, his own surprisingly warm.
"Thank you,"
he whispered, his eyes shining.
You gave us back our voice. Later that afternoon, back in my room with Eleanor, the signed and notarized termination agreement sat on my table. It was done. The sun was beginning to set, casting long, golden shafts of light through the window. We didn't say much. We didn't need to. We had faced the dragon in its den and emerged not just unscathed, but victorious. We were not victims. We were not liabilities. We were the authors of our own story. So,
she said softly, breaking the peaceful silence as she looked out at the perfectly manicured gardens we would soon be leaving behind.
What's next?
A new chapter, I replied, a genuine, unburdened smile spreading across my face for the first time in a long, long time. One that we get to write ourselves. What an incredible story of courage from Grace. She reminds us all that it is never too late to reclaim your life. Her journey wasn't just about escaping injustice. It was about fighting for dignity and proving that you are the author of your own story, no matter your age. Have you ever had a moment where you had to fight to make your voice heard? We would be honored to read your story in the comments below. If Grace's journey moved you today, please show your support by liking this video and subscribing to the channel for more powerful stories. This is Mary from the Kitchen Table Radio, reminding you that your story matters. We'll see you next time.